Hello everyone, I'm Congressman Anthony Gonzalez. Welcome to my third quarter update. Yesterday I asked many of you to leave questions on Facebook and Twitter. I have those questions here as we've done each quarter. But before I answer them, let me give you a brief rundown of what my office has been up to since my last update. It's been a busy couple months, as you can imagine, and quite a bit's gone on. So if you didn't get a chance to ask a question yesterday, you can email us directly on our website at anthonygonzalez.house.gov, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. First, on the constituent side, we always start there. So over the last 3 months, my office has opened 338 cases on your behalf with the federal government, closed another 213. That brings our total number of constituents helped with respect to cases to 1,046. So we track that and metric on that, and I think we've done some great work there. Really proud of the team, frankly, for doing everything there. And then also, we've secured nearly $6 million in grant funding for Ohio's 16th District for causes like combating domestic violence, for serving disabled veterans through adaptive sports programs, which is hugely important, and improving transportation infrastructure at Wayne County Airport. So I've mentioned this at various points that we have somebody in our office who focuses exclusively on bringing grant dollars back to the 16th District. These grants are out there, and I think it makes sense for us to proactively go get them. So if you're somebody who's looking for federal grants in a different organization, please contact our office, because if it's out there, we'll find it. And then additionally, we hosted 2 town halls, conducted a number of roundtables on different topics, and connected 443 veterans to resources through our Veterans Resource Tour. Which again, if you're a veteran, I hope you'll check those out, and please spread the word. It's just a great place for veterans to kind of access all the different services all at once. So that's that on the constituent side. On the legislative side, I was proud we passed our first bill this quarter. The bill is H.R. 2613, known as the AI to Assist Enforcement Act, which works to ensure that new and innovative technologies are available to law enforcement that are working to stop money laundering, specifically in Northeast Ohio and across the country. This is hugely important. It's one of the tools that I think we should be equipping our federal government with to make sure that they're going after the drug traffickers, the human traffickers, in the most efficient way possible. So the way it works now is it's basically all on paper, and it's very analog, where people are looking at each of the individual cases directly. And what I would like to do when you really study this issue, it's tailor-made for technology. So what I would like to do is set up a system where we can use artificial intelligence, we can use machine learning to comb through the data itself and find the patterns to uncover the drug dealers. We need to cut them off in any way possible, and I think this is a good way to do it through the work I've been doing on the Financial Services Committee. So really excited about that. And additionally, on the tech front, I introduced the Iogan Act to combat manipulated media content known as deepfakes. If you follow these videos that we do, these weekly updates, I mention a deepfake is basically what you saw in the movie Forrest Gump. So when you saw Forrest Gump sitting with President Kennedy and all these different people throughout history in the movie, and it looked like it actually occurred, that's a deepfake. When that technology was developed years ago, it was very expensive. Only Hollywood studios could do it. And now, because technology has evolved so quickly and it's gotten so cheap, pretty much anybody can do it. You can do it with an iPhone and your MacBook if you have that. So this bill that we passed would help us improve our national security by helping us research and identify the various deepfake technologies. So deepfake is designed to erode public trust, and I want to make sure I'm equipping our law enforcement with the right tools. So that's also in the works. Additionally, secured a number of new co-sponsors for the Jobs Act, which will help close our skills gap by allowing Pell Grants to apply towards short-term job training programs at community colleges like Tri-C, Stark State, anywhere across the state. We're up to 52 co-sponsors in the House, and just this week we received the endorsement of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, which is 48 members, and a great endorsement to get. In August, actually held a roundtable at Tri-C with various stakeholders and educators to hear about how Pell Grant expansion is important to students in their community. It was a great discussion. We had people from all over the district. If you have a story to share about how you think this legislation would affect you, please do reach out to my office through our website or social media. We'd love to hear from you on it. I'm really proud of this. it's picking up steam. I'm hopeful. We've been working this pretty hard on the House floor, and I know Senator Portman and Senator Kaine are doing the same in the Senate. So hopefully we can get that through. And then lastly, before I get to your questions, just want to let everyone know that if you are interested in more updates like this, you can subscribe to my weekly email newsletter. It's called the Weekly Huddle. And guess why? A little bit of a pun there. That goes out every Sunday. And so with that, we'll get to your questions, which we have right here. And thank you, as always, for allowing me to be your representative and for participating in today's session. So the first question, well, first let me just open with this. Obviously, a lot of the questions that came through were on the impeachment inquiry that we're going through in the House. So I'm just going to start by giving a blanket, 5 minutes or so on my stance with respect to what we're doing here in the House. And then we'll get into the rest of the questions. I hope to kind of answer every one, but the majority of the questions, frankly, were on impeachment. So I figured I'll just knock this all out at the beginning. And if you have additional questions, either write in or comment in the comment section, and we'll make sure that we get to those. So with respect to impeachment, a couple things I think are important. First, I think we need to take a big, giant step back and ask ourselves, what are we actually doing here? And what we are doing in any impeachment is you are literally overturning the wishes of the American people. I believe that there are two things that I vote on and consider in Congress that are of the utmost importance, that are the most solemn and serious things that we can do. Number one is sending our troops into harm's way. I think if you're going to do that, you better be darn sure you know what the mission is and what we're doing, have a clear plan for success. You need to be committed to that because that is such a solemn act to send our men and women to fight on our behalves. So that's number one. The second is impeachment, because it represents a fundamental shift in who we are as a people. We were founded on the notion that a free people can govern themselves. And in an impeachment, what we are saying essentially is, we're not so sure anymore. We want a political body to make that choice for us. And so I think that should only be pursued in the most serious instances. And so with respect to impeachment, I believe you need essentially two things in order to consider this. Number one, you need clear, compelling, unambiguous evidence of a major crime that threatens the future of the Republic. That's number one. And number two, and this is how you can figure out whether you have number one, you need the most open, transparent process possible. If you're going to impeach a president, the American people need to know exactly what the evidence is, why you're doing it. It needs to be unambiguous. You need cross-examination. Basically, the amount of due process that we afford any American citizen, at a minimum, we owe that to the President of the United States, any president, no matter who it is. The president, if you're going to impeach them, him or her deserves incredible due process. And so what are we doing today? I currently sit on one of the committees of jurisdiction. I'm on the Financial Services Committee. Speaker Pelosi, when she unilaterally decided to kick off the impeachment inquiry, articulated 6 committees that she said are going to look at this. Okay, so I'm on well, first off, another point. Every other time we've gone down this path, it's happened with the vote on the House floor. And the reason why that's important is because that's what establishes the rules and the process that you're going to go through. When you unilaterally decide in the Speaker's office, it's anything goes. It's whatever the majority party wants to do. So what are we doing? I'm on a committee of jurisdiction. You would think that as somebody on a committee of jurisdiction who is tasked with looking at this specific thing, that I would be able to read the evidence, that I would be able to cross-examine witnesses. I think that we should be able to call our own witnesses if we'd want, and to at least participate in the inquiry, seeing as I'm on one of the committees that's supposed to be doing it. Currently, I'm not even allowed in the room. I'm not allowed to sit through the testimonies. I'm not allowed to ask questions. Not allowed to do much of anything, frankly, and neither are any Republicans except for those on Intel and Foreign Affairs. And so with respect to an open and transparent process, to respect the due process that everybody deserves, especially the President of the United States, who's a duly elected officer in this country, we're failing miserably. We are completely failing. And so, frankly, I don't support this, and I don't know how anybody does right now, given that the only information we have is coming directly from Adam Schiff. So all the news reports, all the leaks that you're seeing, 100% of those come from Adam Schiff, and that's not an exaggeration. because the way that the committee is set up, the Democrat Party, Adam Schiff, controls the transcripts, controls the typing, controls the electronics, controls any information that comes out of there. And so all of the things that you're seeing, the little snippets of information, are little breadcrumbs, in my opinion, that he's dropping to ultimately help him make his case. And his goal, which is not to run a transparent process, that is not his goal. His goal is to impeach the President of the United States. I believe that. That is his goal. And so everything that he's leaking is designed to move people in that direction. What is not coming out, and what I don't think ever will come out, which is unfortunate, is the cross-examination, the questions that those on the Intel and Foreign Affairs Committee are asking to understand, again, what is actually happening. The other things that have come out, the other two things that have come out, one is the transcript itself from the call, the summary of the transcript. I read that. I didn't read a quid pro quo. I didn't see anything that certainly that I thought was impeachable. And so that was my read on that transcript. And then the other thing that came out was the president of Ukraine said, I didn't even know the money was being withheld, and I didn't feel pressured. And so if that's all that we have a broken process that's not open, that's not transparent. Again, I'm on a committee of jurisdiction, and I'm not allowed to look at it. That's crazy to me. I don't understand how anybody could support that kind of a process when we're talking about overturning the wishes of over 50 million Americans. I just think that's wrong, and I think it sets a horrific precedent. So we're in that situation, and we're in a situation where the only two people other than Adam Schiff's leaking that have talked about it, President Trump and the President of Ukraine, have both basically said the same thing. One said there's no quid pro quo, the other said I didn't even feel pressure, and I didn't know that the money was being withheld. So we're going to keep monitoring it. Like, as your member of Congress, that's my job. But again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. We govern ourselves in this country. The voters choose the president. We hold the president accountable. The voters choose. And the way that this is going on, the only way you could possibly ever overturn this is with unbelievable evidence and a clear, crystal clear process with great transparency. And we're just failing miserably on that front. And so I do not support it. And that's kind of where I stand on that. Again, I know there'll be additional questions and comments for sure. This is a very divisive issue. As I said the first time I commented on it, my fear is that this is going to rip the country apart even more than we already are. And that's definitely happening. But please feel free to submit your comments and questions, and we'll be sure to answer those as well. So that's the impeachment. Moving on to next questions. So this one is from Christina. Question is, why hasn't USMCA been brought to a vote? The short answer is because the Speaker of the House doesn't want to put it up for a vote. So when you're in the majority and you have the speakership, the Speaker controls everything that goes to the House floor. There's one way to get around that, and that's with what's called a consensus vote, and I think you need like 300 members to support something in order to get that. But by and large, that almost never happens. By and large, the only things that come to the House floor are those things that the Speaker puts up. And so at this point, and this is another problem with impeachment, at this point, the Speaker has not been willing to put USMCA up for a vote. And frankly, this has been my number one priority since I got into Congress, was helping us pass USMCA. I believe USMCA would be the most positive economic policy that we can enact in this Congress. So independent organization, the USITC, has scored the trade deal. The projection is it creates over 175,000 jobs, in particular in manufacturing and agriculture, two industries that are incredibly important to the 16th District. And it will raise GDP by a 0.25%. I actually think it would do even more than that, but that's the projection. And so I haven't heard either in committee, and I've challenged my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to make the opposing case. I haven't heard in committee or anywhere, frankly, an economic argument why we would not want this. Oh, it's also projected to raise wages. Raise wages. So to me, it's a no-brainer. In private, everybody has said to me that they like the deal and they want it to go forward. But because we're so distracted with everything going on, and the Speaker is playing politics with this one, we're not getting a vote quite yet. But I will continue to work on that. continue to work with my Democratic colleagues to try to force a vote before the year's over, or certainly before the Congress is over. We need it. We need it in the 16th district. We need it in Ohio generally, and I look forward to supporting its passage when it comes up, which is hopefully soon. So great question on that. Kyle writes, are we working on a trade agreement with the UK for when Brexit occurs? Is it at least a draft? So the answer, Kyle, for that question is yes. We are working on a trade agreement with the UK. President Trump and Boris Johnson have a very strong relationship and have been, my understanding, have been working quite closely, their teams, on making sure that when Brexit occurs, I think it'll probably occur, there's a little uncertainty there, but when Brexit occurs, that the transition, at least with respect to the UK and the United States, is as seamless as possible. I think that's smart. Frankly, we're in uncharted territory with Brexit. No country has ever left the EU in this way, and so there's a lot to be figured out there. And if you're following British Parliament politics at all, we keep a little bit of an eye on it because of the Brexit situation. You'll see that they know they want to leave, but they don't quite know exactly how, and they can't agree on it. And so it looks like there's been some movement in the last week or so, but nothing final yet. I'm hopeful, but again, the short answer to the question is yes, we are working on it. We want to make sure that there's no residual negative effects on our U.S. economy, and I don't think there will be, at least not any major ones. So that's that question. Next one came from Twitter. Saladort. I liked your question about how Facebook would comply to keep social and financial data separate, but Z, I assume you mean Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg's response was inadequate. The current FTC settlement does not cover any requirement to keep such separate, so can Congress require Facebook to sign up to additional stipulations against this expressly? Great question. So this is in reference to our committee hearing, financial services hearing that we had yesterday with Mark Zuckerberg. About their Libra initiative. So if you're not following this, Facebook, which some of you are probably watching this on, wants to launch their own, what they're calling a cryptocurrency. I'll spare the technical jargon on this, but I don't actually think that's what it is. But in any event, so they are running with this notion that they're going to create a coin called Libra. Concurrent with that, I have a lot of challenges with that. I don't, as a general statement, I do not trust Facebook to protect our data, to do much of anything. I think the tool has been abused quite horribly over the last couple of years, and really, I just have a lot of issues with the company generally. But I don't think that Facebook necessarily has been a great thing for this country or the world, despite their best intentions. And so when a company like that wants to get into the payments business and wants to launch their own currency, we need to take a really hard look at it. One of the questions that I asked Mark Zuckerberg yesterday was with respect to keeping financial data and user data, profile data, separate. I think that's an important distinction. If they're going to run this thing, you better not be commingling, our profile data, things that you're doing with your family and friends, with all your financial data. I just think that separation is important, and that's awfully intrusive to allow that kind of integration. And so that was my question, and he said, well, we're going to comply with a settlement that we reached with the federal government not long ago. I also did not find his answer to be particularly compelling on that front, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit basically the question that you just asked. I'm going to submit that for the record. We have 7 days to submit written questions, so I'm going to submit that question to Mark Zuckerberg in writing, exactly as you said it, with maybe a few tweaks, but and we'll update once we get that back, because I think what you're saying is exactly right. So the next question comes from Drew. This is a good one. Is there anything you can do to put an end to these constant spam phone calls I get on my personal cell phone and my business landline on a daily basis? Isn't that annoying? I get them just like you. I get them, and so the answer is yes. I voted in favor of a bill earlier this Congress to address these spam calls. There are legitimate calls that we need to make sure get through, and we're not silencing individuals in this country. But with respect to spam calls specifically, yes, we can do something about it. We are doing something about it. Hopefully it takes effect soon, because I feel like at least half of my calls are these spam things. You answer it and there's nobody there. You get some goofy dial tone or something. Kind of scares you, to be honest. But in any event, so that's that. This one comes from WJ. Is there anything you can do to help to Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority? It needs major investment, and letting it decay due to neglect is destroying a major part of our infrastructure. So the answer to that is yes. So I mentioned earlier that we're bringing grant dollars back to the community. We have people in our office, one person in particular, who spends all day, every day working on this. And that's what we're doing in support of the RTA. And we don't have a status update quite yet on it, but I will say that that's the route that we're taking. I also believe if we have an infrastructure bill, which I think is a long shot, frankly, but if we get that done, there's a chance that some of those funds could be dedicated to RTA as well. We did an interesting roundtable down at Gojo a couple weeks back, and we were talking about the Jobs Act, but we were also talking about the local economy generally. And one thing that really struck home for me, we talked about a lot of issues, but one that kept coming up was just how difficult it is for some of our folks to travel and transit to their places of work. And you talk to some people, and it's an hour and a half each way just to get to their job. And so we do have an issue with transportation in our region for sure. And I think you're seeing it across the country in cities like Cleveland, cities that kind of share our demographics and our industry mix. I think are all struggling basically with the same thing. And so one of the things we are going to do is work to help out RTA. But additionally, I actually think this needs a lot more creative thinking with respect to how we think about transiting people across our region so that they can get to work, they can take care of their kids. I mean, I can't even think of this. You got an hour and a half both ways, and then you somehow have to get your kid to daycare. You got to get your kid to school, make sure they're picked up. I mean, it just creates all kinds of struggles for a family that wants to work, wants to do everything right. And so I take the point, and I just want you to know that we are working on it, not just with RTA, but transportation generally in the region, and connecting people to their jobs. So, great question, by the way. Next one is from Tag, Ohio. Do you support Trump's approach towards Syria, where he betrayed the Kurds, who lost over 10,000 people fighting ISIS, or us? Not sure what okay. So basic statement, I released a statement earlier on this. So for me, I do not believe that we have a role in the Syrian issue. I really don't. A military role, certainly. We have a diplomatic role, but I don't believe we have a military role. But at the same time, I do believe that it would have been nice if we would have provided some sort of safe harbor for the Kurds. I share the same frustration. The Kurds fought alongside of us to help us defeat ISIS, which is, for me, the scariest terrorist organization that we've dealt with in my life. It's easy to forget that it wasn't that long ago, really, the 2015, 2016, where they were lighting people in cages on fire, they were taking land, they were cutting people's heads off on YouTube. I mean, just the most horrific things. When Al-Qaeda says we don't want to be a part of you because you're too extreme, I think you've got a real problem on your hands. And the Kurds, to put it mildly, and the Kurds were instrumental in helping us secure that and to defeat ISIS. So in that sense, I would have liked to see something a little bit different on that front. The good news is there has been a permanent ceasefire that was just announced, and I think now we got to monitor that. But hopefully that provides the safe harbor. But again, I would say at the outset, where I absolutely agree with the president, I just don't believe that we need our men and women fighting in that particular region. There really truly is this sense, and I've heard people say this, frankly, in Congress. Well, we always need people there. We always need to be fighting. I don't believe that. I just don't. I think we need to do whatever is going to keep our country safe and secure. Sometimes that means we need to be in places, but this notion that we should be there forever, I think is just wrong. I think it puts us in the middle of a situation that we can't ever win, and I don't want to send our troops into a situation that is unwinnable. So That's that one. Good, great question. They're all great questions, by the way. So this is a multi-part question. You can see it. There's kind of a lot here, but we'll get two of them. So one's from Nicholas, and Nicholas and Mark kind of go back and forth. I'll read the first two, and then I'll start. So Nicholas says, how are we addressing the student loan debt and payback struggles for families? What action steps are we taking to cap tuition costs and loans to ensure a successful future for our youth? And what are we doing to create better worker candidates in Ohio? Many customers are struggling to hire and retain workers. You're 100% right on that. Mark writes, following on this question, my college-age son recently was explaining some of the student loan repayment options. One is an income-based repayment plan. So if a couple with student loans married, they could potentially have higher payments. I do realize there are options. My point is, I have never heard of such a loan before. Why would we do this to students who have just graduated and are still trying to establish themselves? So great questions. So with respect to, what are we doing to create better worker candidates in Ohio? Again, I'll go back to the Jobs Act, and I'll mention this briefly. I know you guys have heard me talk about the Jobs Act a lot, but what the Jobs Act would do is it would provide real skills training that are directly applicable to the economy using Pell Grants for our low and middle income students. So I actually think this is an amazing option for a lot of people, and I think will provide, when I talk to employers and I run through exactly how it would work, I get a lot of excitement. That's why I work on this so hard, frankly, is because I'm hearing so much enthusiasm in the community when I'm talking about it. So I think the Jobs Act would be a big help on that front for sure. But what you both get at, and you're 100% right, is the student loan crisis that we have in our country. The reality is a lot of people, Mark, are in the same situation that your son, or was it your daughter? College-age son, that your son is dealing with, where they're trying to start their lives. They've done everything right. They've gone to high school. They're gone to college. They're going to graduate. They're doing everything that they were told to do. Everything we said, if you do these things, you're going to be just fine in this world. Sounds like you found a great person to marry as well. And that should be the American dream. But the reality is, because of the rising cost of tuition, people can't get out from under the debt. They feel like they can't get married, they can't buy a house, they can't buy a car, so they're just saddled with all of this. And everybody's frustrated by it. Two things I'll kind of put in your ear, things that I'm working on. So number one, the tuition cost is what drives the debt. If tuition were lower or weren't quite as high, there would be less debt, right? You take out debt to afford the tuition and the living costs. That's where the debt comes from. And so to me, I think we need to first say, okay, what's causing the rise in tuition? It's pretty clear, and the New York Fed just released a statement on this, or just released a study on this. As soon as the federal government took over the federal student loan program, the second that happened and guaranteed all the loans back to the university, they no longer had any incentive to keep tuition costs low. And so you've seen tuition costs continue to increase year after year after year. And I would argue a lot of that is because of the fact that the federal government has taken over those loans, and the universities know that, and they know that if they keep raising tuition costs, it's just going to get backstopped by the federal government eventually. Now, that debt sits on your sons and daughters' balance sheet, but it is guaranteed at the federal level, essentially. And so part of the thing that I would do, that I want to work on, is finding a way to get rid of that, to get the federal government out of the student loan business. I don't see a reason for them to be in it, frankly. I think they've caused more problems than they've solved, and the incentive structure is totally backwards right now. So that's number one. Number two, you mentioned another thing that I think is a huge problem in our society. So we have all these little marriage penalties built into our system right now, where just by getting married and raising a family, you combine the incomes, you combine the balance sheets, all of a sudden people start losing benefits or their costs go up, and all kinds of bad things happen that basically penalize them for doing what is, I think, the greatest thing in the world, which is to marry the person you love and raise a family. I think that's the most important thing that we can all do as people in this society. And so, if that's your calling. And so we have this system set up where we're penalizing people, and it doesn't make any sense. And so we're also looking at what I'm calling marriage penalties all throughout the tax code and throughout the federal government system to try to get rid of those, so that We're not saying to people, hey, if you get married, your costs are going up because now you don't qualify for things that you thought you did. But maybe to get it to a point where we're actually encouraging couples to do just that, to get married, to find the love of their life, get married, have children, raise them in a beautiful community, and live happy lives. So we're working on all of that. And then the last point is on the loan servicers. I don't know if you're referring to this, but the crazy thing is when you take out a federal loan for student loans, the servicer, you can't pick. You are randomly assigned to a servicer somewhere, so by the government, by the Department of Education. Your application comes in, you now have this servicer. You have no choice, which is absolutely insane. I don't understand why that's the case. So that's that. John writes, how about getting the subcommittee to do something about H.R. 303? That seems to stall in every Congress since the early 1990s. The disabled retirees that earn their full retirement shouldn't have to take a reduced retirement to fund their own darn disability. Talk with Bill Arakis from Florida. He's addressed this issue for years. When are the Republicans going to push back? This is ineptness at its best. So, first off, thank you for flagging this bill for me. You have my word, I will go talk to Bill Arakis when we get back next week specifically on it. I'll get his thoughts directly. We have started looking at it, but frankly, I don't have fully articulated thoughts on it right now. But as a general rule, and I think my record shows this, I'm somebody who believes that there's literally not enough we can do for our veterans. If you're going to lay your life on the line for this country and defend it, then we need to take care of you. And so I will look at this. I will talk to Bill Arakis directly. Like I said, early next week, we'll have a more fleshed out answer for you at that point, and we'll reach out directly. Have your name, we'll connect. But I certainly appreciate you giving me a heads up on this one. Next question is from Steve. Please do something about the cost of health care. $25,000 a year for health insurance for regular families is near impossible. It won't be long before I'll have to cancel my health insurance and hope for the best. Steve, amen. I'm with you 1,000% on this. To me, and again, it goes back to what I said earlier, we are best as a society when we are in a world where people have the opportunity to get married, raise children, have a good job, afford their lifestyle, live their version of the American dream in a community that they love. That, to me, when I think of this country and what my father came over here for, that's what I think about. I think about having barbecues on Sundays after church. I think about being able to love and take care of my family, my kids, my grandparents, being able to see my parents and my kids' grandparents, and just living that version of the American dream. That, to me, is what this country is, and what I love so much about it. And when you have healthcare costs that are going up 10, 20, 30% a year, $25,000 a year for health insurance, people can't do that. They just can't do it. And we have to get this under control. And so one of the things that I've taken on, if you've been following these videos, is I've said, look, I know for sure that Medicare for All is a terrible idea for a whole host of reasons. Number one, you can't pay for it. Maybe that's enough for everybody. But for me, it would actually bankrupt our rural hospitals. If you live in Wayne County, the chances are very, very good, or Medina County, but the chances are very, very good if you live in Wayne County, if we went to Medicare for all the hospitals would shut down. And that would happen all across the country because you just couldn't survive on Medicare rates. They need more than just Medicare rates for hospitals to stay open. And so the only way you could do it is by either cutting services, which is probably what would happen, or raising taxes to such a level that nobody could stomach it. I mean, you'd have to just soak the middle class with taxes to get to Medicare for all. And so I think that's a disaster, but that seems to be the number one plan coming out of the other side right now. What I've said is I want to come up with my own plan. I want to come up with my own plan that has two basic goals. Bring the cost of healthcare way down in this country. We're way higher than any other country in the world, in the developed world. There's no real reason for it, no good reason for it anyway. But we need to bring the cost of healthcare down, and we need to expand coverage. Because if we are sitting here in a world where we have families who, again, have done everything right, have been working hard, sending their kids to school, who are literally saying, well, I can't afford this anymore. I'm just going to have to take a chance and hope that I don't get sick in the next year. That's a horrible outcome. There's no reason for that. We don't have to have it that way. And I'll be releasing my plan sometime in the new year, and it'll be pretty comprehensive. We've been working on it for basically since I got into office. As you can imagine, meeting with all the different players in the healthcare sector and coming up with a plan that makes sense, that takes care of our seniors, that gives people choice and options and flexibility, and allows you to get the care you want at a low cost. It's not simple. If it were, somebody else would have figured it out by now, frankly. But I'm working on it and look forward to presenting my plan and rolling it out here in the near future. But great question. This one's from Josie. Are we going to address prescription prices and the cost of health care for seniors? So again, similar to the last question, the plan that I'm putting forward will address both of those issues. At a base, I'll comment on prescription drugs just quickly. Basically, in this country, where we have generic alternatives, our drug prices are actually quite low and are okay. It's where we do not have generic alternatives and when formularies don't cover the right things, that those costs really spike. And so one of the elements of having a plan that makes sense, in my opinion, for seniors would be to get more generic alternatives into the market quicker and make sure that there's more competition. It's just basic economics, right? If you have a monopoly, you can charge whatever you want. If there's a lot of competition, guess what? All of a sudden the price goes down. And so that's one of the tenets, but again, stay tuned for a more robust rollout and discussion on that. I think this is our last question. So this one's from Leah. How are you doing? Thank you for asking. I appreciate the question. I'm doing well. So personally, we haven't really talked about this. I don't do many personal updates, but my wife is expecting our second baby. This one will be a girl. And I couldn't be more excited. Really looking forward to that. So we'll be having her soon. And I just couldn't be happier on that front. My son's healthy. My wife's doing well. Family's great. And from what I've noticed, that's on the personal side. And then from what I've noticed, the district's doing well. And I put, the way that I prioritize my life is I basically say, my family, God comes first, my family. Those are the two things that, that you got to be clear on your priorities, and that they're always first for me. And I got to make sure I do, I'm a dad and a husband before I'm a member of Congress. And so I take care of that. But then on top of that, I work for you. I don't have a social life, really. I don't really do a whole lot on that front. But I spend as much time as humanly possible trying to work on your behalf. And I take it seriously, and it truly is an honor. And so while this job can certainly be frustrating at times, it couldn't be better in that sense, because I get to serve you, and it's what I've always wanted to do my whole life. So I appreciate the question, and thanks everybody for listening, and thanks for your questions. And if you didn't get yours answered, please submit it. We'll get it the next time, but just really appreciate everybody. Have a great weekend, and thank you for allowing me to be your representative. Thank you.